The kitchen at the Hartwell estate smelled like money. Not food, not flowers, money. That specific blend of catered salmon and imported candles and the kind of confidence that comes from never once worrying about a heating bill. I stood at the edge of the grand foyer in the dress I'd bought on sale 3 weeks ago, the one my mother said made me look like a CEO, and I tried to feel like I belonged there. I almost convinced myself I did. "You look stunning," my husband said, appearing at my elbow, sliding his hand to the small of my back. He meant it. I could tell the difference by then. 3 years into our marriage, I'd learned to read every inflection. This one was genuine. It didn't help as much as I needed it to. "Your mother seated my parents in the East Wing again," I said, keeping my voice low, my smile in place for the couple drifting past us toward the champagne. He blinked. "I'm sure it's just the overflow section. Next to the caterer's staging area." I looked at him. Again, he exhaled through his nose, the way he always did when he didn't want to say what he was actually thinking. "Tonight is important, Maya. Let's just get through the speeches and then I'll talk to her." "You'll talk to her." I'd been hearing those 4 words for 3 years. I nodded and smoothed the front of my dress and walked into the ballroom. The Hartwell Group's 20th anniversary gala was exactly the kind of event I had organized. Not metaphorically, I had literally planned it. The venue sourcing, the vendor negotiations, the seating logistics, the press invitations, the evening's program. My fingerprints were on every folded napkin in that room. For the past 2 years, as director of brand and events, I had turned a dusty quarterly newsletter and a forgettable web presence into a marketing operation that generated $3.2 million in new contracts in a single fiscal year. The trade press had noticed. The clients had noticed. 300 guests in that ballroom tonight were there partly because of my work. My mother-in-law had noticed too. She'd just never said so out loud, and I understood now, standing at the entrance to the room I'd built for her family, that she never intended to. My parents were somewhere in the East Wing. My dad, Lou, who had driven 8 hours from Columbus with his knee acting up again and his one good blazer pressed within an inch of its life. My mom, Rose, who had gotten her hair done for the first time since Christmas because her daughter was being honored tonight. That's what I told them. That's what I believed. I found Priya near the bar, holding a glass of sparkling water and wearing the expression she reserved for situations she had already determined were going to be disasters. "Your mother-in-law moved the program," she said before I could speak. I felt the floor shift slightly under me. "What do you mean she moved the program?" "The running order. The one you submitted to the AV team 3 weeks ago with your segment, the marketing division highlights, the campaign reel. It's gone. I talked to Marcus from the production crew. He got a revised order this afternoon. Catherine sent it directly." Priya's voice was careful, deliberate. She was a contract attorney by trade, and she never said more than she meant to. "Your name isn't on the new version." I stood very still for a moment. The string quartet behind us shifted into something bright and glittering. Somewhere in the room, my father-in-law was laughing at something, that big, booming laugh that had made me feel welcome the very first Thanksgiving. My husband was across the room shaking hands, smiling, already absorbed into the machinery of the evening. "How long has she had the revised order?" I asked. Marcus said the email was timestamped 2 days ago. Priya looked at me steadily. "She planned this, Maya." I didn't doubt it. I'd known on some cellular level for months that something was coming. The way you know a storm is building before the skies change color. The small exclusions that seemed minor in isolation, not being copied on the client dinner invitations, my project budgets requiring secondary approval that no other director needed. The way Catherine would describe the company's recent success in interviews and somehow never quite finish the sentence that would have included my name. Each thing small enough to explain away. Together, a pattern I'd been too hopeful to name. "I need to find my parents," I said. I navigated through the crowd, past the table arrangements I had personally approved, past the floral installations I had argued for against the florist Catherine preferred. I found my parents near the back of the East Wing, not in the overflow section exactly, but close enough. A round table near the doors that led to the kitchen corridor, half obscured by a portable bar cart that someone had parked in front of it. My dad stood when he saw me, the way he always stood when I walked into a room, like I was still 12 and coming home from school. My mom's face broke into that particular smile she had, the one that was all relief and pride at once. "There she is," my dad said, pulling me in. He smelled like the cedar closet where he kept the blazer. "This place is something, kiddo. Really something." "I helped design the lighting scheme," I said, and my voice came out almost steady. "Of course you did." He squeezed my shoulders, then held me at arm's length. "You look like you run the place." "I do," I almost said. Or I did. I almost said. Or I did. I'm still figuring out which tense applies. My mom touched my face, the quick, private gesture she'd been doing since I was small. "Is everything okay? You look a little pale." "I'm fine." I covered her hand with mine. "I'm really glad you're here." The program began at 8. I stood near the back of the main ballroom, Pariah beside me, and watched my mother-in-law take the podium to the kind of applause that only happens when a room full of people are grateful for their own proximity to wealth. Catherine Hartwell was immaculate. She always was, 62 years old, with the posture of a woman who had never once slouched in apology, silver hair swept back, a gown the color of a winter lake. She had a gift for occupying a room, not by filling it but by making it feel like it had been built specifically to hold her. 20 years, she began, her voice carrying without effort. 20 years of relationships built on integrity, on vision, on the Hartwell name meaning something in this industry. The room murmured approvingly. I watched my husband near the front, his expression, that particular careful neutrality he wore when he was managing something. She spoke for 11 minutes. I know because I counted. She talked about the company's founding, about the partnerships they built, about the recent period of growth that had brought new energy and new direction. She credited the senior partners by name. She mentioned the finance team. She mentioned the operations director, Gerald, who had been there since year 3. She never said my name. Not once in 11 minutes. In a speech summarizing a year in which the marketing division I ran had its best performance in company history, my name did not appear. I felt Priya's hand close briefly around my wrist. "Steady." I breathed. Then Catherine set down her notes, the signal she used when she was departing from the prepared remarks, and she smiled at the room with the warmth of someone who has never needed anything from anyone in it. "We are also excited to announce an evolution in our leadership structure," she said. "As the Hartwell Group moves into its next decade, we believe in surrounding ourselves with people who truly understand our legacy and our values. To that end, I'm thrilled to introduce a new creative and brand vision, led by someone who has been part of the Hartwell family in every sense of the word. Charlotte Whitmore, daughter of our dear friends Edward and Sylvia, whose instincts and pedigree make her a natural fit for the direction we're taking." A smattering of applause for a woman I'd never met. Charlotte Whitmore, in a pale dress in the front row, gave a practiced wave. I heard it, the language. A natural fit. Every sense of the word. Pedigree. Instincts. Every word chosen to describe Charlotte was the photographic negative of what Catherine had always implied about me, that I was a girl from Columbus who'd married in, who had learned to pass, who was at her core not quite the right material, not quite what the Hartwell name deserved beside it. She hadn't fired me. She'd just announced my replacement to 300 people before she'd told me. She'd done it in public because she knew I wouldn't make a scene. She'd spent 3 years studying me, and she had calculated, precisely and correctly, that I would stand in the back of the room I had designed and absorb this quietly. She had not counted on the fact that I had stopped being quiet 6 weeks ago. Because 6 weeks ago I had found an email. Not by snooping. It had been forwarded to me by accident, a chain my mother-in-law had started with the senior partners about transitioning the brand leadership role back to someone with roots in the company's founding culture. She had been planning this for 4 months. While I was negotiating contracts. While I was presenting the campaign that won us the Delacroix account, while I was driving my parents to believe they were coming tonight to watch their daughter be recognized, I had spent those 6 weeks being very, very prepared. I crossed the ballroom floor. I heard Priya's sharp intake of breath behind me. I didn't stop. I moved through the tables with the same deliberate calm I used in every presentation I'd ever given in that building, past the startled faces of people I recognized, clients I'd brought in, vendors I'd negotiated with, colleagues who watched me with wide eyes as I reached the podium. Catherine saw me coming. Her expression shifted, not to anger, not immediately. First to confusion, because she genuinely had not anticipated this, then to something cooler, more controlled. She held the podium with both hands as I reached her. "Maya," she said under her breath, a warning and a dismissal in 2 syllables. "Thank you," I said, and I stepped to the microphone. The room quieted with the specific hush that happens when people sense something unrehearsed is occurring. 300 faces, some confused, some intrigued, a few already recording on their phones. "I'm Maya," I said, and my voice did not shake. "I'm the director of brand and events here, and I've been with the Hartwell Group for 4 years, 3 of those as a director. I helped plan tonight, which I mention only so you know I'm not lost." A ripple of uncertain laughter. I let it settle. I want to add something to the remarks you just heard, because I think context matters, especially when we're talking about legacy. I reached into the small evening bag Priya had been holding. She had moved up behind me, and I felt her presence at my back like a counterweight. I held up my phone, screen facing me, and read from the document I had pulled up. On March 14th of this year, the Hartwell Group was awarded the Delacroix Properties account. That contract alone represented $1.1 million in annual retainer. The pitch was developed entirely within the marketing division. Our campaign concept, our research, our presentation. I led that team. I looked up. 3 months before that, the Castlemaine Financial rebrand, a project that generated $600,000 in fees and was featured in 2 trade publications. That was my work. The campaign reel that plays on a loop in your lobby. The one clients comment on at every tour. I built that. I looked at my mother-in-law. She was standing 3 feet away, absolutely still, her face a composition of controlled fury. "I say this not for applause," I continued, turning back to the room. "I say it because in 11 minutes of remarks about this company's growth, the person responsible for the work that drove that growth was not mentioned. And the reason she wasn't mentioned is standing right here. A silence that pressed against the walls. What was mentioned," I said, "was the woman who will be replacing me. Charlotte." I glanced toward the front row, where Charlotte Whitmore had gone very still, her champagne glass suspended halfway to her lips. "I don't know Charlotte. I'm sure she's talented. What I know is that she was chosen not because of her work, but because of her family name. And what I know is that I was not told I was being replaced. I was supposed to find out in a room full of 300 people and smile about it." I paused. "I am not going to smile about it." My mother-in-law moved toward me. I stepped back from the mic, creating distance, and I spoke the next part quietly, just to her. But in a room that silent, I carried. "You told the partners I wasn't a natural fit, that I didn't have roots in the founding culture." I kept my voice even. "My father drove 8 hours tonight with a bad knee to watch his daughter be recognized. My mother got her hair done because her daughter works here. It was supposed to matter here. They are sitting near the kitchen door because you put them there." I held her gaze. "That is not a culture I want roots in." I set my phone on the podium. "I'll have my formal resignation on your desk Monday morning. I wish the company well." I looked once more at the room. "Thank you for the work. I'm proud of it." I walked off the stage. The sound that followed me was not applause, not exactly. It was the collective exhale of 300 people releasing a breath they hadn't known they were holding, and then the low, urgent wave of everyone talking at once. Priya fell in step beside me without a word. We walked to the east wing. My parents were on their feet when they saw my face, both of them, the same instinct, the same immediate reaching toward me. "What happened?" my dad said. "I quit," I said. He looked at me for a long moment, his big hands on my shoulders. Then he nodded, once, the way he nodded when he'd made a decision on a job site. "Okay," he said. "Let's get out of here." My mother linked her arm through mine and didn't say anything, which was its own kind of comfort. My husband found me in the foyer. His face was a geography of conflict, the stunned disbelief of someone who had just watched a controlled detonation and was still registering the shockwave. Maya. He caught my arm gently and I stopped. Maya, I didn't know. I swear to you I did not know. I swear to you I did not know about Charlotte. I looked at him. I had loved this man. I still did. And the parts of myself that hadn't yet caught up to tonight. I know you didn't plan it, I said. But you knew something was coming. You've known for months that she was pushing me out, and every time I brought it up you told me you'd talk to her. His jaw tightened. I was trying to protect the peace, I said. I know, I understand the impulse, but the peace you were protecting was hers, not mine. I looked toward the ballroom, toward the sounds of the party resuming behind us. The event would continue. Of course it would. She moved my parents near the kitchen. Tonight, of all nights, after everything I built for this company, she made my father sit near the service entrance. And you knew she would treat them that way. You knew, and you kept asking me to be patient. He didn't argue. That told me everything. I need you to decide what you want, I said. Not angrily. I was past anger somehow, standing in the cool of the foyer with the marble under my feet and my parents waiting for me. Because I already know what I want. I want a life where my family doesn't have to earn their right to be in the room. I thought we were building that. I was wrong about the terms. I left him standing in the foyer. Priya drove. My parents followed in their car. We ended up at the diner 4 miles down the road, the one that served breakfast all night and had fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly green. We took the corner booth. My dad ordered pancakes. My mom got coffee. I ordered the same thing I always ordered when my life was falling apart. Eggs scrambled, wheat toast, orange juice like it could fix something. Tell me what you have, Priya said, her legal pad already out on the table. I laid it out. The forwarded email chain. The documentation I'd been quietly compiling for 6 weeks. Project records, contract filings, time-stamped deliverables, the emails and approval chains that created an unambiguous paper trail of what I had built and when. I'd sent copies to a cloud backup Priya controlled the week before. I'd been thorough. Growing up without a safety net teaches you to build your own. You have a strong wrongful termination claim, Priya said, reviewing what I'd shown her on my phone. Constructive dismissal at minimum. Being publicly replaced without notice is textbook. Depending on your employment agreement, there may also be a compensation argument around the de la Croix account specifically, given that you brought in the client and your contract may entitle you to performance bonuses that were never paid. I want my work acknowledged, I said. Publicly. I don't want to spend the next year in litigation, but I want them to know I will if they don't. That's a negotiating position, Priya said, writing. A good one. The public nature of tonight actually helps you. There are 300 witnesses to a fairly clear pattern. My dad was quiet through this, working through his pancakes with the careful attention he gave to everything. My mom refilled her coffee and watched me with that look that meant she was waiting for me to say what I actually needed to say. She's never thought I was good enough for them, I finally said. Not to Priya. To my mom. Not once in 4 years. Every family dinner, every event, every introduction. She'd find a way to let the room know I was a different category. Friendly about it, polished, but consistent. I know, my mom said, and I kept thinking if I worked hard enough, if the numbers were good enough, if I was useful enough. I know, my mom said again, softer. It was never going to matter to her. I said the words out loud for the first time and felt them land in the silence of the diner, solid and irreversible. Because the problem was never my work. The problem was where I came from. My dad set down his fork. The problem, he said, is her, not where you came from. Where you came from is the reason you built what you built. Don't let her make that into something small. I looked at him, at the blazer that he'd pressed for tonight, at the hands that had built things all his life with the same care I'd learned to put into my work. She put you near the kitchen, I said. He shrugged. One shoulder, the way he shrugged off things that weren't worth his energy. "I've worked kitchens," he said. "Good people back there." I laughed. It surprised me, the sound of it in that diner at 11:30 at night. My mom smiled. Priya stopped writing for a moment and smiled too. The weeks that followed were not simple. My husband and I existed in a careful, painful suspension, still in the same apartment, still speaking, but both of us aware we were standing at a threshold and neither of us sure which direction we were facing. He called his mother 3 days after the gala. I knew because he told me, sitting across the kitchen table with his hands around a coffee mug like it was the only solid thing available. "She doesn't think she did anything wrong," he said. "She thinks she was protecting the company. She thinks you were," her word, "volatile." "Volatile," I repeated. "Because of the speech." He looked up. "I told her she's wrong. I told her what she did was wrong. She didn't agree. Did she apologize?" The answer was on his face before he said it. "She offered to give you a positive reference," he said, "for future employment." I got up and washed my coffee mug because I needed something to do with my hands. Priya had sent a formal legal notice to Hartwell Group's counsel the week after the gala. The letter laid out her position with the precision Priya brought to everything. The constructive dismissal case, the intellectual property questions around the campaign work, the unpaid performance bonuses. It also included a brief, pointed paragraph noting that the public nature of the company announcement, combined with the documented communication about the termination decision, created meaningful exposure for the company in terms of reputational and legal risk. The letter requested a settlement meeting. They responded in 10 days. Their initial offer was an insult dressed in professional language. Priya read it to me over the phone, and I could hear the contempt she was working to keep out of her voice. "They're testing," she said. "They want to see if you'll fold." "Counter," I said. I went back to work in the meantime. Not for them, I'd already started taking on freelance brand consulting, projects I'd quietly cultivated in the background for the past few weeks, knowing I might need them. One of the clients I'd brought to Hartwell Group reached out through a mutual connection 3 days after the gala, having heard what happened. They wanted to talk about working together directly. That conversation became a contract. That contract became the beginning of something. I named the business honestly, without nostalgia or performance, Bennett Brand Strategy. My name. My work. No one else's legacy attached to it. The settlement negotiation took 5 weeks. It ended in a conference room with 2 lawyers and no family members present, which was exactly how it should have been. What we reached wasn't everything I wanted. I'd wanted a public acknowledgement, a statement that named the work I'd done. What I got was a financial settlement that reflected the value of that work even if the words didn't. A clause that prevented them from misrepresenting the origin of key campaigns in any future press, and a clean separation agreement that freed me from the non-compete language that had been in my original contract. I signed. Priya squeezed my knee under the table. The morning I signed, I drove to my parents' house in Columbus. Not for any particular occasion. Just because I needed to be in the kitchen, where I'd grown up, with my dad's radio playing something from the 70s and my mom's coffee and the particular light that came through the window above the sink in the morning. My dad was in the backyard when I got there, fixing a section of fence that had come loose over the winter. I watched him work for a while from the porch, the focused economy of his movements, the way he measured twice and cut once, the same approach to everything. "You didn't have to drive all the way down here," he said without looking up. "I know. You okay? Getting there." He nodded. "Drove in a nail." "You built something real, you know. At that company. What she did doesn't change what the work was." "I know," I said. "And now you're building something else." He glanced back at me. "You've been building since you were 9 years old with the Lego set you wouldn't let anyone else touch. You figure it out." I sat on the porch steps and let the March sun do what it could. My husband and I made a decision in April. Not easily, not without grief, but with a clarity that had been coming for a long time. We sat on the couch in the apartment and we were honest with each other in a way we should have been 2 years earlier. And what emerged from that honesty was the recognition that we had been wanting different things from the marriage, without admitting it. He wanted peace with his family. And I had finally accepted that peace with his family would always come at my expense. Neither of us was a villain in the room that night. We were just two people who had loved each other and had run out of the particular kind of compromise the arrangement required. He cried. I cried. We ordered Thai food and ate it on the floor because neither of us wanted to sit at the table where we'd had too many hard conversations. And somewhere in the middle of that we managed to remember, briefly, why we'd liked each other to begin with. His mother sent me a note 2 months later. No apology. I knew better than to expect one. But a note on the thick cream stationery I associated with every formal communication from her that said simply, "What you built for the company was significant. I should have said so." That was the closest Catherine Hartwell would ever get to the words she owed me. I read it once and put it away. Bennett Brand's strategy had 3 clients by summer and 6 by fall. Priya helped me structure the business properly, contracts, IP protections, the things I'd neglected in the excitement of early momentum. I hired my first part-time contractor in October, a designer named James who was meticulous and funny and had the same instinct I did for when something was almost right, but not quite. We were building something small and sound. I moved to a smaller apartment, not because I had to, but because I wanted a space that was entirely mine, furnished with things I'd chosen without compromise, hung with art I actually liked, with enough light in the morning to make coffee by without turning on the overhead. My parents came to see it in November. My dad walked through every room with the quiet assessment he gave to structures, checking the windows, the baseboards, the state of the radiators. He approved of the radiators. My mom cried a little in the kitchen, which she claimed was allergies, and then we ordered pizza and sat on my floor because I still didn't have a couch yet, and my dad told a long story about a job site in 1987 that had nothing to do with anything but made us both laugh. Until we couldn't. Late that night, after they'd gone to the hotel down the street, I stood in my kitchen window and looked at the city. Not the view my mother-in-law's world had offered, the curated skyline from a high floor in the right building, but the street-level, ordinary beauty of a neighborhood that was mine because I'd chosen it and could afford it with money I'd made myself. I thought about the gala, the podium I hadn't planned to take, the 300 faces, my mother-in-law's hands gripping the lectern, my father's blazer, the way the mic had felt in my hand like something I'd been carrying for a long time and had only just picked up correctly. I had not been quiet. I had not swallowed it and smiled and found my husband later and whispered that something had to change. I had spoken in the room I had built, with the evidence I had gathered, in front of the people who needed to hear it. And then I had walked out with my parents and gotten pancakes. The story I told afterward, to Priya, to my parents, to the few colleagues who asked, was not about revenge. It was never about making someone pay. It was about the moment I finally understood that I had been bending myself into smaller and smaller configurations, trying to fit into a space that had never been made for me, and the only way to stop was to simply stop. You don't wait for permission to take up room, you take it, and if the room isn't big enough, you build a different one. There were days the grief came back, for the marriage, for the version of the future I'd imagined, for the years I'd spent trying to earn something I was never going to be offered. Grief was honest, and I let it be what it was without dressing it up as something else. But there were also mornings when I sat at the desk in my apartment and opened my laptop and worked on something that was entirely mine, something no one could restructure or reassign or announce the replacement of at a party, and I felt something settle in my chest that I had not felt in years. Steadiness. Not happiness, exactly. Something more durable than happiness. The particular quiet that comes when who you are and how you live are finally pointing in the same direction. My dad texted me in December. Just a photo. His living room, Christmas lights up. My mom in the background in her robe, the one that had a reindeer on it she'd had since I was a kid. No message. Just the picture. I saved it as my phone wallpaper. It stayed there. And when I sat down in January to write the new client proposal, the one for the account that would triple Bennett Brand Strategies' revenue if it came through, I put my name at the top of the document without hesitating. No one else's. Just mine. That was enough. That was exactly enough.